Hey fam, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications. All right, folks, we have seen the Mueller report that basically lays out obstruction of justice by Donald Trump. But his Attorney General, William Barr, says, no, there was no obstruction of justice. I made the decision. I didn't see any. Roll the tape.
There is substantial evidence to show that the president was frustrated and angered by his sincere belief that the investigation was undermining his presidency, propelled by his political opponents, and fueled by illegal leaks.
Really? The white man was frustrated? Eli Honig, a former federal prosecutor, says that's BS.
Was any person other than the president of the United States, I can say as a former prosecutor, this will be a knockdown case for obstruction of justice. I've charged and convicted people on obstruction of justice based on a fraction of this evidence.
Absolutely amazing. Now, activist Samuel Singyangwe wrote this tweet. Y'all love this one here. Pull the tweet up. AG Barr literally wrote a report called The Case for More Incarceration, where he said putting more black men in prison would, quote, benefit society. Now he's saying a white man can't be charged with felony obstruction of justice because his feelings were hurt. Well, let's get into our feelings with our panel. Teresa Lundy, she is the founder of TML Communications. Malik Boyd is a CEO of Deshuri Products. And Davon Love is Director of Public Policy, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle there in Baltimore. Malik, I got to start with you. Really? His feelings were hurt? So sad.
So that was one of the lamest excuses I've ever heard, but it's clearly evident to us that the system, and if there's anybody that denies this, this is a classic example of a system that has benefited white privilege and still continues to this day. If a black man, if President Obama would have ever said something like that, the country would have fallen apart. And so the question for African Americans is, how long do we continue to let this kind of stuff go? When do we become connected with an agenda that ensures that we can address some of this stuff with the individuals that we put in office?
Well, and Teresa, what really gets me, again, is his hurt feelings. But I also find it still unbelievable with this whole notion that they are operating by a Department of Justice memo that the President of the United States cannot be indicted. I'm sorry. A federal judge hasn't ruled on that. The Supreme Court hasn't ruled on that. And I thought no one is above the law in the United States. Even if you commit a felony as a president, you should be able to be indicted if you did something or I did something. In fact, it's so crazy that we're actually saying that anybody in the federal government, all the way up to the vice president, can be indicted, but the one person who can't, that's nonsense.
Absolutely. And I think everybody needs to take an educational lesson on the Constitution and how our judicial system actually works. Because when you're a natural born citizen here in the United States of America, one of those freedoms, yes, is freedom of speech. But the other one is if you are committing a crime, you are punished to the fullest extent of the law. And so, you know, when I heard that, I was a bit baffled, because what makes the president, outside of being who he is, you know, a leader of the free world, but not someone who should be exempt from it? So we have to really start looking at what we're saying to the public, what's real and what's fake, and really start to understand the basis and the notions of where that's coming from. Because if we keep pushing that type of blasphemy out there, we will probably be in a worse state than we are now in terms of finding the truth and delivering justice when needed.
Well, and in fact, Davon, I want to go to you next, and I want to tie in the story out of Baltimore with this very discussion. The cops who killed Freddie Gray, those cops, none of them went to jail, not a single one. Yet the black men who set a car on fire, they're going to jail for several years. And if I compare that case in Baltimore to what we're seeing with this notion of Donald Trump. And this is not just Donald Trump. That memo could have applied to President Barack Obama, could have applied to President Bill Clinton. And so you had this memo that was written. But still, I find it unbelievable because that you can say that, well, because the president is so busy, they can't be indicted. No, if you do wrong, you should be indicted. And the vice president, cabinet members, generals, all these folks, they can be indicted and not him. And what Donald Trump did, and this whole idea that, oh, well, you know, his people didn't follow through on his orders, Donald Trump tried to obstruct justice. It is undeniable. And you have two systems for those in power, those who are not. Those guys in Baltimore are going to prison for several years, and those cops who killed Freddie Gray are still walking around getting paid, Davon.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's tremendous amounts of cynicism in the general public about whether or not we actually have a system that's fair. Now, many of us have known for years the criminal justice system is a system that protects those with power and money. And so what we see with the president is that he is able to use all manner of legal machinations in order to protect himself and his interests in ways that folks that aren't president of the United States, folks that have significantly less power and influence, have at their disposal. And so I think it's important for us to think about what message, you know, beyond just the politics of it, because I think the other panelists and you have done a good job of you know, talking about the politics of it in terms of federal government politics. But I think it's also important to think about what message does this send, right, to the average American citizen about the nature of the criminal justice system. And what this does is just it furthers the idea that has been growing, I would say, over the past few years, given all, you know, the uprisings, the issues around police brutality becoming more mainstream. What this story does is that it gives credence to the fact that we live in a society based on racism and white supremacy, and that those that hold that kind of power are able to protect themselves from the state in ways that disproportionately undermine the humanity of people of African descent, people of color.
Well, and a thing that also I find to be real interesting when you look at how Donald Trump operates. Don McGahn was the White House lawyer who's the White House general counsel. When he went before Bob Mueller, Malik, was instructed to tell the truth. He could have been prosecuted for perjury if he lied. If you want to see how this Trump White House operates, Don McGahn went to work for a law firm after he left the White House. The Trump campaign, they're penalizing his law firm. There's a story on Politico right now where one Trump advisor said, why in the world would you want to put your enemy on the payroll? They literally are penalizing him because not only would he not lie for Trump when he was ordered to, he wouldn't lie to Bob Mueller, and Trump and his people are upset because he wouldn't keep lying for him.
You know, it's interesting because you tied in the Baltimore case with Freddie Gray. And I think we can tie it up really simple. The badge, the road, or the elected office, the burden of being in those spaces does not supersede the burden that justice has to be spread out equally and equitably. But time and time again, it's being proven that the system does not work for those who do not have the resources or have darker hue of skin. And we're now seeing a boldened use of this system. And I think Trump is doing well to teach America a lesson for those who have declared that this does not exist. We're looking at it live on center stage.
Teresa, Steny Hoyer, the number 2 for Democrats in the House, he said that, you know, we really should not be pursuing impeachment. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she said she is going to sign on to Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib's petition calling for impeachment. Now you have Senator Elizabeth Warren. She says Congress should launch impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump. I don't understand why Democrats right now are running scared. You cannot convince me. There is no way you could convince me that if this was a president named Barack Hussein Obama, even if the Republicans only control one chamber, there is no doubt in my mind that they will be clamoring for impeachment proceedings if this report happened under President Obama.
a lot of things has happened since the 2016 election, and it looks like the only courage that is happening from the Democratic Party is from the younger membership outside of Elizabeth Warren, who's running for presidency, who's going with the talking points. But I think what we really need to start to understand that when we start saying, you know, let's impeach the president, we also need to make sure that, you know, it's a firm impeachment with some sustainable value to it. So yes, if it was Barack Obama, I do believe everybody, you know, on the Republican side would just be raising their hand without getting the facts. But of course, since we are dealing with our America, which is right now, that we are also seeing, you know, pretty much those negative connotations of what happens and how they're weighing against their own elections, because people don't know if Trump is going to win in the next cycle. So I think everybody right now is playing the cautious card, and hopefully, you know, they'll make the right decision if impeachment is the right thing to do for this president.
But Davon, what this is about is the rule of law. And again, this is not a question of Democrat or Republican, red or blue, liberal or conservative. This president, undeniably, the information is clear. This man tried to obstruct the investigation into him. And he said yesterday, I could have fired Mueller if I wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of, you know, absolute power that I think has really colored the way in which the Trump administration has operated. And so to your point, I mean, it would make sense for Democrats to use every instrument at their disposal to check the president in terms of the way in which he's trying to wield power. I think, though, and this may be kind of an unpopular, you know, perspective, but it's interesting in terms of the Democrats' unwillingness to, you know, proceed with impeachment proceedings, because if you think about the United States history in interfering with elections around the world, and it continues to do so, its history of undermining elections around the world. And I imagine that there's some things that have to be reconciled if the Democrats and if the Congress in general is going to, you know, proceed against the president in terms of impeachment, particularly relating to foreign involvement, you know, of Russian involvement in our elections. It really calls into question, you know, what is the real nature of the value of democracy, not just when it benefits us, but the value of democracy as a principle. And so I do think on principle, I think the Democrats have a responsibility to proceed with impeachment proceedings. But I think a much larger question, which is, as you know, in the United States, as you know, as Americans, you know, there needs to be a standard set that the United States does not do what it's alleging of what Russia has done to the United States elections in 2016. We have to make sure that we're just as strong as making sure that the U.S., through its intelligence agencies, aren't carrying out those same kinds of activities around the world.
And Malik, I want to go to that point before I go to my next story. Here you now have Senator Scott of Florida now wanting information from the Department of Justice about Russia tampering with the election there in Florida. They, according to the Mueller report, they accessed data in Illinois and Florida. They laid out clear, undeniable evidence of Russia trying to help Donald Trump and help Bernie Sanders because they hated Hillary Clinton. You had Putin sending his oligarchs to America to establish ties with Donald Trump and his administration so they could lift those sanctions. And Donald Trump did exactly what Putin wanted by not following through with those sanctions. What you have here is an administration with deep ties to Russia. He's doing the bidding of Putin. And Republicans, why in the world are they not demanding that this administration do more to protect our election? There is no doubt Russia will try to do in 2020 exactly what they did in 2016.
Well, Roland, you know, I think my fellow panelists brought this out, and we just got to call a spade a spade. America has been involved in other countries' elections for years, hundreds of years, and we continue to do that same thing. And so, you know, one, the Republicans aren't going to say anything. And to your point, it's not a Republican or a Democrat thing. It's government and what we have consistently done, not only on our own soil, but across the waters. I mean, yes, 1,600 in national elections look a little bit crazy, but try a local election in Philadelphia or Chicago and see what kind of tactics are used on a daily basis. So either we're going to drain the swamp and everyone in it that's been involved and create a new system, or things are just going to continue to do what they do right now. We create smoke screens, fake like we're angry, and wait for the next election cycle.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.